So in this segment, we're going to be talking about the EU in disbelief over the UK's Northern Ireland Protocol plan. So this coming from Tony Connolly, article written on Tuesday the 17th of May. Great work again from the man himself. So we'll go through this and I'll give my opinions on it. So the heavily signalled UK threat to introduce legislation to breach the protocol has been greeted with dismay, even disbelief in Brussels. And I don't know why they're so surprised by this. The UK have been hinting at this stuff for a while. Do they not remember the internal market bill, which would have violated the protocol? I mean, I'm amazed that they're surprised, if that makes sense. Nothing this government does surprises me. One diplomat from a larger EU member state said they were baffled by the reckless UK decision at a time when the West has been standing shoulder to shoulder against Vladimir Putin in defence of international law. That may be the reason why they're surprised that the UK would violate international law despite condemning Putin so much for, well, to be fair, Putin has done a lot more than violate international law. That's probably the bare minimum of the bad things he's done when you compare it to the stuff he's done against the people of Northern Ireland. One diplomat from this is a widespread scepticism at the substance of the UK's rationale, even anger in some quarters that the UK is enrobing itself as the exclusive custodian of the Good Friday Agreement. And that is particularly egregious, considering that the Good Friday Agreement was an international effort, and of course, the EU played a large part in the Good Friday Agreement. The single market and the customs union set the foundation to allow the free movement of goods between Northern Ireland and Ireland. Without that open that open border, we would never have gotten the Good Friday Agreement. So the UK saying, "Oh, we're doing this for the Good Friday Agreement, and all of you guys, none of y'all care," is just ludicrous, to be honest with you. And, the Americans are condemning us, saying we're the ones putting the Good Friday Agreement at jeopardy. The EU haven't really said that as such, that the UK are the ones putting the Good Friday Agreement in jeopardy, but they can use that same line on us, because it's true that we are, the prevailing thought is that the Northern Ireland Protocol protects the Good Friday Agreement as it stops a hard border in the island of Ireland. Yes, you can talk about the Good Friday Agreement's points of the need for consent from both sides of the community, the unionist side and the nationalist side, but that cross-community consent was not sought after for Brexit, so why would it be for the protocol? You could argue the protocol impacts Northern Ireland more, but the simple fact is Brexit was always going to damage Northern Ireland. That was always going to happen. The former WTO chief came out recently, I need to cover that, his statements, where he said a trade border in the Irish Sea was always inevitable. In short, capitals and EU institutions are suspicious that this is more about internal party machinations than about peace in Northern Ireland, which is true because, Boris Johnson, by the looks of it, slapped down Liz Truss and told her to stand down. He's apparently very annoyed at her, and you can tell by the change of rhetoric where she's gone from talking about scrapping the protocol to reforming it. I wonder why that is. Like I said, the buck always stops with the executive, and apparently they are very annoyed at her for the briefing she has done against the protocol. They apparently had a whole thing choreographed as to how they were going to attack the situation, and in the end Liz Truss sunk it before it even started. Which is madness, isn't it? We'll cover that article soon. Add to that sense of weariness that at a time when there is a full-scale war on European soil, officials and diplomats are having to come back to the issue of whether or not GB sausages should be allowed to enter Northern Ireland, which is true that, this is where some of the arguments that the Brexiters make, what about Cumberland sausages? These are the points they make. That said, the EU has certainly prepared a low-key, if determined, response. 2 weeks ago, the Commission circulated speaking points to member states emphasising the need for Western unity in the face of Russia's war with Ukraine, and pointing out that the Commission's proposals from last October on medicines, customs, agri-food checks, and an enhanced role for the Northern Ireland stakeholders and institutions had the potential to deliver pragmatic solutions to the problems linked to the protocol, because the main issues that people have with the protocol, at least in my opinion, the people in Northern Ireland have, is with agri-food checks. That's what it seems like the issues the DUP have anyways, that it kind of separates Northern Ireland out when it comes to food, etc. It's ridiculous, honestly, but no one really talks about the ECJ being a problem or anything like that. That's a British talking point, or a Tory talking point, really. However, the EU will not shy away from reviving legal action against the UK, and I still think the EU shouldn't have frozen legal action. I genuinely am of that opinion. And if London persists in turning a bill into law, then that will be a nuclear option and will prompt robust trade retaliation. We'll see what happens with that. Hopefully, it does happen. This is seen as some way down the line. Brussels is adamant that negotiations should continue, and Šefčovič, the EU's chief negotiator, is likely to accept Truss's invitation to travel to London for a meeting of a high-level joint committee. So again, they are still talking to each other. I don't know what the result is of that trade invitation. I'll keep an eye on that. But the EU have said, you turn this thing into a law, there will be retaliation, and that's without them kind of invoking the law, if that makes sense. Just the UK putting this into law is a problem, without even invoking it, without even using these new laws, essentially, if that makes sense. And the view in Brussels is that there is a possible landing zone within the October proposals that the UK has never fully explored, because the UK hasn't discussed these October proposals until recently, where we rejected them. And look, we're in May now. October was about 5-6 months ago. So it's kind of crazy that we've only just started looking at these things now. This is partly because UK officials last autumn were prevented from moving back from last July's command paper, which is also true, that the UK took such a hardline stance because of Lord Frost. We never actually looked at what the EU offered us in October. In fact, I haven't actually looked at the October proposals either. Maybe I need to go back through those. But those talks will be difficult, not least because the EU will now feel it is negotiating under duress, that this is a forced negotiation, that the UK is saying, look, we're going to scrap this thing, we're going to make internal reforms unless you act now. This is the threat of someone who is going to take unilateral action. So if the EU caves now, they're going to look very weak. That's why I think they're going to stick by their October proposals, so it doesn't look like they're negotiating under duress. Because again, the EU have to deal with other global powers that are far stronger than us, and far more likely to take military action. Looking at you, the Russian bear. It's also very possible that the UK will publish the protocol bill in around the same time that the joint committee takes place. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, that the bill is going to be published anytime soon. I think it'll be a few more weeks, maybe even a month, because it doesn't seem like they actually know what they're doing. It doesn't seem like this has all been written out yet, because again, Liz Truss jumped the shark on this one. I'll talk about that more in this article, but what I'll do is, if I remember, I'll link this one below so you guys can read it before the video comes out, because essentially Liz Truss jumped the shark on it. Brussels and Dublin will now attempt to peel Northern Irish opinion away from London's demands. So essentially, the EU and specifically the Irish government are going to go directly to Stormont and also talk to the Irish people about it. But I think that won't work, because the UK's whole argument is the protocol needs to be reformed because Stormont can't function. Stormont can't function because of the DUP. The DUP won't go back to Stormont unless the Northern Ireland protocol is scrapped. So I don't think going to talk to the people in Northern Ireland, talking to Stormont talking to the DUP will work on this one. Officials say that the real problem with the protocol is the burden and cost of the customs formalities and the notion it creates a trade border in the Irish Sea. What I'd say to those officials is that you can import food from anywhere in the EU single market. You really don't need Britain anymore. Those issues can be addressed in the negotiations, say sources in Brussels, perhaps not entirely in the UK's liking. So essentially, they're going to try and phase out the UK as much as possible by trying to bypass the Tories to go to Northern Ireland directly, which is a bold strategy, Cotton, and let's see how that plays off for them. The fact that the UK has added the role of the European Court of Justice, VAT and EU state aid rules to their wish list of things to change should be viewed as irrelevant to the process, that they are not primarily concerned about ordinary voters. And that's true, that if the UK were concerned about ordinary voters, these 3 points, the European Court of Justice one definitely wouldn't be there. VAT and state aid rules they can kind of talk about, because obviously state aid rules, they would help businesses in Northern Ireland, and obviously cutting VAT in theory would help, but typically when you cut VAT, companies just pocket the difference in tax. As we've seen all the time. We saw that with the fuel duty cuts in the UK recently. There was I thought it was a 10 pence cut, but apparently it was a 5 pence cut, and the petrol station just profited the money, essentially didn't do anything. This poses the question, if the notion of a trade border down the Irish Sea was sufficiently eroded by a more light touch approach by the Commission, would the DUP still refuse to enter the power sharing agreement for the sake of the executive? Now this is an interesting question. It's a really interesting question, that if the EU sort out the trade aspect of the protocol, that there's a light touch approach and they can buy pretty much wherever they want from GB with minimal issues, would the ECGA still need to be taken out of the protocol? That's interesting. Would the DUP say that's enough for us? I don't think they would do. I think they want to be treated exactly how people in England or in Britain are treated when it suits them. They don't want things like abortion rights, but when it comes to issues being dealt with, they would rather it goes to the UK Supreme Court rather than the European Court of Justice. Donaldson is setting out the DUP 7 test for going back to Stormont, included the demand that the Northern Ireland has democratic control over EU single market rules that apply under the protocol. What that means, I have no idea. Have democratic controls over EU single market rules. So is he saying like the Northern Ireland should be able to pick and choose what EU standards they listen to? Genuinely, it's a very bizarre statement. Is whether that amounts to stripping away the ECJ, a non-starter for the EU, remains to be seen. So Donaldson's main arguments aren't against really the ECJ; they're more against EU standards and also goods being checked in the Irish Sea before they get to Northern Ireland. Those seem to be his key issues. The biggest problem is that the UK's actions have further shattered trust, a prerequisite in negotiation. And as Thor said, broken bones can heal, but broken trust can take a lot longer. The Irish government in particular strongly urged the UK not to proceed with the threat of legislation, to no avail. There is also a degree of bitterness over the shifting messages from London that the Irish sea border was the problem, now the ECJ was the problem, now the problems of the protocol are exacerbated by COVID and then by the Ukrainian war. I mean, they're stretching anything to come up with an excuse, because the idea is, I think what the British government are trying to say is, when we voted for the protocol, originally it wasn't a problem, everything was fine. And then, because of the EU's interpretation or their implementation, that was a problem. And now the ECJ is a problem. We didn't anticipate it going to the European Court of Justice, even though that's in the protocol. We want to go to a neutral court, through arbitrators, which it can still go through arbitrators as part of the protocol. And then he goes, all the problems, they're being made worse because of COVID and now the Ukraine war. Now Northern Ireland are suffering, blah, 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 even though their groceries on average are cheaper than the UK's. I genuinely, I'm confused, honestly. Sources were also exasperated by the UK's relentless trashing of the protocol, repeating at every turn that the Good Friday Agreement was under strain when a clear majority of MLAs support the protocol. And you would think that if the Good Friday Agreement was so under threat that from the Northern Ireland protocol, the MLAs would come out and be against the protocol in its entirety, but they're not. The people of Northern Ireland surely wouldn't have voted for MLAs who are supportive of the protocol. They surely wouldn't have voted for the protocol parties. Unless you don't know what you're talking about and you're a Brexiteer. The notion that the Good Friday Agreement eclipses the protocol is a kind of lie, which reportedly is the British Attorney General Braverman's advice regarding it as simply bizarre, which is true. That the idea that the Good Friday Agreement is superseded by the protocol is not true. The protocol is there in support of the Good Friday Agreement. That's the point of it. Something that's even the American point of view. Can an agreement be reached that would obviate the threat of legislation? Officials believe there is a narrow window of negotiation between now and when the legislation is introduced. I don't know. I don't know anymore. I think the UK and the DUP have set up this really high bar, and I don't know if they can force Donaldson to climb down. That man's pride is going to be his biggest problem. I don't know if the bar has been set too high for anyone to climb down from. That's the key problem, which is expected to be sometime before parliamentary recess, end of July. So I said June in another video of this one. They've got till July to come up with something. Officials concede that the European Commission's view has evolved during the period of time in which the protocol has been in place. People argue the European Commission has been inflexible. The European Commission has been very flexible on a lot of issues, and they could have taken us to court last year but didn't. Let's not forget that. In other words, there's a real-world picture of the true risk to the single market, and that the full corpus of EU customs law need not apply. So essentially what they're saying is the EU took a really strict approach to the checks in the Irish Sea, and they realised that maybe actually the chance of goods leaking into the EU single market isn't actually that bad, so we can actually lower checks and make them less aggressive, which is fine. There's two different ways you can go at things. You can be too lenient or too strict, and then you can find the kind of midpoint between the two. The EU took a too strict approach and are kind of pulling that back a bit, which is fine. That happens. It's better to be too strict than too lenient. The EU believes that the learning curve is reflected in the substantial easements on customs formalities enshrined in the October proposals, but again, that's been rejected by the UK. The Commission believes the UK is not properly engaged with those proposals. The tone and content of Truss's speech do not suggest any great enthusiasm on London's part Truss says the UK expects a new revised protocol, which isn't going to happen. What the UK is basically proposing for is a renegotiation, which the EU have been adamant that's not going to happen. To sources in Brussels, this means that London does not want to merely disapply parts of the protocol, they want an entirely new one, a protocol the UK likes, essentially something more in line with the command paper potentially. But, the arguments that these people use, fix it, don't nix it, oh, we don't want to scrap the protocol, we want to reform it, you can't argue that when you've been constantly briefing for weeks on end that you're going to scrap the protocol. You can't suddenly wheel it back and say, oh, we didn't actually say that. It doesn't make sense. For the most part, as much as I have annoyances and grievances with a lot of journalists, they still have to double source a lot of the things that they say, depending on what the editorial criteria is. So the government are lying when they say they had no intention to scrap the protocol, at least no intention of saying they did. They could have not intended to scrap it, but they were always going to say that's on the table, because that's what they use for negotiation tactics, if that makes sense. So the arguments that Johnson makes, fix it, don't nix it, all this stuff is rubbish. The idea that the UK wants EU leaders to come to the rescue and give Šefčovič a new mandate to negotiate a radically changed protocol is greeted with disbelief in Brussels. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. The EU cannot show weakness here, because again, they have to deal with despotic leaders in the world, especially with the Russian bear, and they cannot show weakness to us, and they won't. And to be fair, they shouldn't, because they are in the right here. We are the ones in the wrong. We are the ones putting the Good Friday agreement at risk here. According to one diplomat, the protocol is the EU's mandate. And, if I was Šefčovič, I'd say, you can't scrap the protocol because it's your mandate. You ran an election based on it. You told people it was a tremendous deal. And I'd be reading off all of those quotes and I'd say, look, you should go back, read those October proposals and tell us what's not good enough in them. And we'll see what we can do. But that aside, we're not going to make wholesale changes to the protocol. We're not going to renegotiate it. And if you scrap it, or if you put this bill into law, we're going to start putting tariffs on goods coming out of your constituency specifically. That's what I would say. The stuff that your constituents make, they're going to look at 20 to 30% tariffs. We're not messing around anymore. If it's a joke, that's what I would say. But that's why I'm not a diplomat. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.